So I wanted to kind of disclose and give out a little bit more information that a lot of people are not really hip to, privy to. But it's probably going to be a two-part series. Is mainly talking about Israel. Um, of course, this is Andrew Bustamante. He is ex-intelligence, and I put that with quotations. I think that he's still part of the CIA. I think that they probably just secretly hired him or still have him on the payroll somehow, some way. And he just goes from podcast to podcast to kind of put out a little bit of misinformation and kind of be an advocate so that if anybody's interested in being a quote unquote spy or in part of intelligence, he's kind of running interference and he's also kind of um, bringing new people into possibly thinking about joining. And then the second video, probably, I don't think this is going to be a complete one video because it's probably just going to be too much dialogue. Um, but this is going to be a part two. How much money has Israel received since the United States created Israel in 1948 with the help of the British? But I'm I personally think that Andrew is completely just, I think he's lying with a lot of this stuff, but that's what intelligence do. That a lot of the time they just kind of give you misinformation. But I'm gonna allow him to give his spiel. You're more than welcome to believe what he is putting out there, but I'm gonna try to combat that with a little bit of information and why I think he's incorrect. But here we go.
We have to support Israel because what's good for Israel is in many ways good for the United States. However, what's good for Netanyahu is not the same as what's good for
Now,
Israel.
what's okay? Can you define that difference there? That's
There's
key.
there's three important differences here,
Yeah.
right? So first of all, it's frustrating to me how many people don't understand the difference between a Jew and
And it's
Israeli.
yeah.
Not the same thing.
What Israeli or
Israeli,
okay?
right? A Jew is someone who follows and believes in Judaism. That can be any citizen of any nationality anywhere in the world. They can be Jewish. You don't have to be Jewish in order to be Israeli. Israeli is a national identity, like American or Brazilian or whatever else, right? So the fact that Israel's government does not separate church and state, the fact that Israel, is a democracy that doesn't differentiate between church and state, that's one thing, but it's different from saying that if you don't support Israel, you don't support Jews.
Yes.
Completely different things. Then you have the entrenched political right wing establishment of Israel. That is Netanyahu. So you've got one element of a government, that's Netanyahu. The government is the government of Israel. And then the faith of the state is Judaism. So you can be a Jew who has no connections to Israel, and that doesn't mean that we have to it makes me angry when people think that there's something wrong with a Jewish person because of what Israel's doing to
Oh
Palestine.
yeah, it's crazy to think.
It's crazy to
It's
think.
insane.
But I just
Yeah.
want to say that out loud because you can support Jews and Judaism without supporting Israel. And I'm also saying that to all the Jewish people out there who are being told that if someone doesn't support Israel, then they are anti-Semites.
Right.
That's not true.
Yeah.
You can disagree with Israel's national policies and still have zero bias against the Jewish people. You can also
So obviously, I agree with that statement. Um, there is a very large, well, I'm not going to say large, but when you factor in how many there are, it is a large population of Jews in America. But of course, when you compare it to the national population, it's still a small minority. Um, as long as they are American, they should be, treated as such, meaning obviously not be treated as second class citizens, not to be harmed, not to be harassed, obviously eligible, always should have eligibility of constitutional rights. Um, and all obviously that's including the First Amendment for them to practice, assemble, and for their faith. But the issue that I have is when th- there is a dual loyalty to Israel, which is a foreign country. It's a foreign entity. And when there are politicians and Christian pastors and Christian preachers and priests and other agencies that have a separate agenda of supporting the state of Israel, that's where I have a problem. As somebody who's America first, it should always be America first. Our politicians should have the utmost and sole loyalty to America, not to any other country. Um, we should be able to criticize not only America, but we should be able to criticize other countries. And it's fucking flawed to sit here and think that, you know, we have the First Amendment and we can't criticize our own country, and much less we're banned or hindered from criticizing another country. So that's where I kind of draw the line. Obviously, the more you look into, Epstein, you look into a lot of the intelligence apparatus in America. Obviously, Epstein was doing a lot of this, not only solely for Mossad, but for the CIA to literally gain an upper hand on um, on politicians, on powerful people, on rich individuals, oligarchs, to be able to literally, exploit them um, for whatever the means may be. So that's where I also draw a line where foreign intelligence or individuals who have dual loyalties to foreign intelligence and their whole objective is to, you know, wish harm or bring harm upon America and American citizens. So that's the caveat that I wanted to start off with. So the second piece of information is the large, overwhelming population of Israelis are Ashkenazi Jews. So when you look at Ashkenazi Jews, a lot of them have DNA, and this has all been tested by universities in Israel as well. But just to, you can definitely look here, and there's obviously other places, but they are mainly from, they are indigenous to Turkey, Ukraine, Russia. Obviously, here, you know, they are Jewish people, and not as in Jewish as in the Bible, but as in Jewish as in converts whose ancestors lived in Central and Eastern Europe, including Germany, Poland, and Russia. So we're going to look at biblical terms. So if anybody who happens to be a Christian or just owned a Bible, you would understand that Asia Minor is up here. Um, Israel sits down in here, and then this would be Lebanon, Syria, and then now you're kind of getting into Turkey, Russia, Ukraine. Well, Ukraine would be over here, Russia would be more over here, and then obviously you get deeper into, um, Europe. So when you take a look at that and you find out that they are not indigenous to the Holy Land, then you would understand why there's such a struggle. So let's importantly look at, now this is obviously the United Nations. Of course, some of y'all are gonna say this, that, and the third. That is not a. I'm not gonna try to get sidetracked on that, but um, what you really want to look at is these. So there was the Balfour Declaration, or that literally um, that was done in 1917, and it promises a national home for Jewish people in Palestine. So around this time, a lot of Jews were leaving Germany and other parts of Europe, and they were moving to what was known as Palestine, or the modern day, or the old day of the Ottoman Empire, which is now modern day Palestine. So, of course, the Great Britain, now the kingdom, had occupied that land at that time, and so a lot of terrorist attacks as the Ashkenazi Jews were leaving Europe with the Zionist agenda. They were moving to Palestine, and they were actually tormenting and terrorizing Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Jews, and Palestinian Muslims. They're also terrorizing the British Empire to get them to leave. So when they left, it was literally, you know, the Al Nakba kind of had started. We're not going to talk about the Al Nakba in this video. That'll be for a whole nother thing. But short story long, there was a lot of high earning oligarchic British folks and Americans who literally gave money to the Nazi regime out of Germany and Hitler. Hitler had an original agreement for Germans, Jews, or Ashkenazi German Jews to sell all their belongings and take their ass to Palestine. Um, Ottoman Empire was like, hey, bro, they're coming over here. They're doing a lot of shady shit. We have to stop it. And so that's kind of what was going on in the 30s, 1930s. So, obviously, the decision on the mandate did not take account to the wishes of the people of Palestine, despite the covenant's requirement that the wishes of these communities must be the principal consideration in the selection of the mandatory. This assumes special significance because almost 5 years before receiving the mandate from the League of Nations, the British government had given commitments to the Zionist organization regarding the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine, for which Zionist leaders had pressed a claim of historical connection since their ancestors had lived in Palestine 2,000 years earlier before dispersing in that diaspora. So when you look at this, what Hitler did, and because of the atrocities of the Holocaust, that kind of sped up this Zionist agenda for Ashkenazi Jews to and Sephardic Jews to literally take an indigenous holy land from people who are from there. Um, so yeah, let's back out of this so I don't get confused. Um, Obviously, this is literally kind of what I was talking about. This is how things are broken up now. There's Lebanon, Syria, Jordan. And of course, all of this belonged to Samaria and Judea um, at a time in history. But which was, hold on. So, so when you literally try to pick one, um, one group of Semitic people versus another, and if anybody who's read the Old Testament, um, the Palestinians would be considered the Canaanites, right? But as you know, a lot of them did not, a lot of the leaders in the Old Testament didn't kill off the Canaanites and the Philistines and all these other Steens and ites. And so when you look at that, you will know um, that a lot of these people dwelt together. Um, now, um, just to kind of give a little bit of history, the democratic history of Palestine has been shaped by various historical events and migrations. Over time, it shifted from a Jewish majority in the early Roman period to a Christian majority in the late and Byzantine times. The Muslim conquest of the Levant in the 7th century initiated a process of Arabization and Islamization through the conversion and acculturation of locals accompanied by Arab settlement. This led to a Muslim majority population, though significantly smaller in the Middle Ages. Some Palestinian families, notably in the Hebron and Nablus regions, claim Jewish and Samaritan ancestry, respectively, preserving associated culture and traditions. So, what they want us to believe is that after the death, after the birth, the life, the death, and resurrection of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, um, that in him starting this new religion, which would have been called the Way, with his 12 disciples, who went on to convert more, and the apostles like Paul, they want us to believe that all these people were just kicked out of the Holy Land, and then they all just can I be honest, just turned white. Versus white people converted to Judaism. So, when you look at the and of course I can go in a little bit deeper, but um versus Arabic, Arabic being one of the largest speaking group in that area at the time. Even Jesus spoke Aramaic. Obviously, there was this those who were Jewish and Samaritan ancestry who obviously spoke Hebrew, and then with the arrivals of the Romans, you had Latin and Greek as well. That's why a lot of the New Testament is made up of 25,000 manuscripts, um, of many of those languages. So here we have one non indigenous group literally occupying the land of another indigenous group. And then, we can't forget that a lot of these people either remain Jewish after the death of Jesus, um, or they converted to Christianity. And then, about nearly a century later, a lot of them converted to Islam. So that is me trying to give a little bit of a historical fact before we go back to Andrew Bustamante. Um, and with that being said, uh, we have to be very, very careful to not, how can I put it, to not pick. I mean, it's almost like they want, like, let's say this was India. Instead of supporting the indigenous Indians to India, we are told to support the British migrants who don't have a claim to that land. And then we're asked to supply billions of dollars in weaponry so that the British can kill off um, Indians. And so, and then, nearly 100 years later, we're just like, no, well, the British have always been here. It sounds crazy when you really think of it like that. And to also give a point, to negate a point that Andrew made, um, let's see, percentage of secular Jews in Israel. And so this is what we got. 45% of Israeli Jews identify as secular or not religious. 35% of Israeli Jews identify as traditional. 10% ultra Orthodox. 12% of Israel identifies as religious or Orthodox, including religious Zionists. Secular, 63 of all native Israelis of European descent identify as secular, compared to 33 of native Israelis of Asian origin, and 25% of native Israelis of North African origin. So, as you can see, a large group of these European migrators are not even true believers to Judaism. And so when you look at it as that, um, you know, a rabbi once said, and I may do a review on that, but of course they don't believe in the entirety of the Bible. It's normally just the Talmud and the Torah. So when you look at that, the part of the promise that Yahweh, or Jehovah, um, and of course we can go, different ways, but as a Christian, I'm gonna say God Almighty, God the Father. He pretty much made this promise that as long as you obeyed His laws and you did what you were supposed to, um, and stuck in His faith, then you were entitled to the promised land. So when you have 63% of non-believers in Israel, then by biblical God law, you would not be entitled to that land, i.e., the Babylonians would have came in, the Babylonians would have came in, the Medes and the Persians would have came in, and then of course the Romans would have came in. So you look at a lot of the times that they were in captivity and why they were in captivity. So you obviously have to read a lot of the Old Testament. You have to look at a lot of the major and minor prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and a lot of it is a similar theme of you are rebellious, you're not doing what you're supposed to, you're not taking care of the sick, you're not taking care of the homeless, you're not taking care of the orphan, you're not taking care of the widow, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're not being generous to the migrant and the converts. Um then I'm going to have to punish you. So literally, we have man taking it upon themselves to create a land and name it Israel versus, you know, um, in God's way. And then, we can definitely go into how they kind of manipulate Christians into believing what Zionist Christians believe. But that's kind of what the details I was going to give for now. But I definitely want to get back to this.
Also, disagree with Netanyahu and still support Israel. Or,
Absolutely,
but
yes.
nobody's
Yeah.
thinking of it that way. People think that Netanyahu is Israel and Israel is Judaism.
It's so stupid. Yeah.
And that's how we end up. And unfortunately, because our media in the United States is commercially based, it's a for-profit business.
Yes.
Anything that the media puts out that they want to get people stirred up, emotional, angry, alarmist, they'll make sure that they tie all those terms together. And, America hates Jews and wants to support Netanyahu.
And that's because, I mean, you're taking the words out of his mouth. He says he makes no distinction between anti-Semitism and anything that speaks out against Israel, which is, I would say, by definition, defining himself and his policies as Israel itself.
Right.
And that's like, when I've been talking with people about this, I'm like, look at all the Israeli people who are in the streets right now.
Calling for a new leader.
Yes, and these are not like Columbia protest motherfuckers, like morons. These are people who are passionate about their country, who are just like, yo, can we get a new? Everyone wants to be safe. No one wants terror attacks. Can we get a new fucking leadership in
Right.
there? Because like Netanyahu's the symbol of it because he's the head of the government. But I've also said this to people, like if you've looked at his cabinet, he looks like a leftist compared to some of those people. They just got to get rid of some of the current administration, which, yes, also includes him. And if you get someone like a little more moderate in there, yeah, there's always going to be disagreements. There's going to be people who are like, oh my God, Israel's only going to do what's good for Israel and all this stuff. You'll always have that. But like, I feel like it could be a lot more manageable because you're not going to win the PR campaign if you're just saying the only end is total victory. When you have all these, and I want to introduce this idea, all these other countries around there who there's some that are hostile, and then there's some who are not, who are sitting there saying, look, we want a two-state solution. We want Israel to exist, but you can't do it completely all on your terms, which is what Netanyahu insists on.
Right.
So a guy that I look at a lot, this is why I bring this up, who is a gangster, he's really fucking cool, is the King of Jordan. This dude never wanted to be king. His father was like croaking on his deathbed. He's like, you're gonna be king. And he's like, what the fuck did you say? And he passed over the older brother. And so this guy had been traveling around the world, wanted a whole different life, takes up this, I guess calling or whatever. And in America, obviously, we're not huge on kings and queens and shit. We kind of fought a war over that. But like, I'll make an exception for this dude. I've had multiple people in here who are friends with him. Like Joby Warwick, tight with him. And Joby's written some things that aren't great for him, and the guy still likes him, which I really like. And Remy Adeleke is good friends with him. A couple other people are as well. But this guy, if you look at his history of all the, like, he took power, I think, in 98, 99. So think of all the things that have happened since then. Started with 9/11 right at the beginning all the way to where we are now. All these different crises that have happened, if you listen to what he said right before they did or right at the beginning, he play-by-plays what's going to happen. And so one of the things that he said on like October 10th or something like that, after October 7th, is that he's like, look, obviously our country has an allyship with Israel, but, and I don't know if he said it in these words, but he was essentially saying that doesn't mean that our current governments always have to agree with each other because there's political differences. And he said, one of the questions he was getting was, well, then why won't Jordan take in the Palestinian refugees? And he's like, I'm glad you asked that. I will give the worst parts of Israel's government exactly what they want if I do that, because that will be effectively ethnically cleansing people from the land, getting it out of their hands.
Right.
Doesn't have to be a genocide or something, getting them off of there, and Israel can go take that land.
Right.
And he's like, I don't agree with the current administration's policies on that. And again, I don't think he said it exactly like this, but he was insinuating like, just get new leadership in there and maybe we can get this thing done.
Right.
And everyone can go home.
Egypt's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
But this isn't the first or second time that they've taken Palestinian refugees since Al Nakba. They've done it multiple and multiple and multiple times. And what's really going on is that Israelis just really want to just do an ethnic cleansing, a complete genocide, and they don't want to see a single Palestinian at all. And so when you look at it like that, of course, that's going to be Egypt's and Syria and Lebanon and Jordan's mentality is, look, we've already helped you take care of, 1 to 2 million people who've literally migrated over the past century. We've taken them in, but you really want to steal this land, and you want us to take care of them when we've already done it. And then you had a two-state solution. You've had many agreements over the past 77 years, and yet you're just choosing not to um, keep up with those agreements. And we're well aware what you've been doing to the Palestinians over those 77 years. um, and as a Black American, I would almost equate it to um, slavery. um, The only thing is they're not getting the free financial benefits from the Palestinians, but the conditions are far worse than Jim Crow, but yet the conditions are, I'll probably say, equivalent to what a lot of black slaves in America are going through. So, we can't just accept it as we can't just assume that it's not that bad, because it's pretty bad. It's pretty much like a modern day Holocaust. Um, so
Twisted politics, because you've got Israel saying that the Muslim world won't take Muslim refugees. And then you've got the Muslim world saying, we're not going to take refugees because you're going to block them out.
That's
You're
right.
never going to let them come back. And essentially what you are doing is you're cleansing
Yep.
Muslims from their land, from their promised land.
Yep.
So it's a disaster. And it doesn't help that Netanyahu gets confused with being representative of Israel when he's not.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't help that Israel gets represented as a democracy when it has absolutely been a thriving democracy in the past, but it has been showing signs of weakening democratic values.
Why do you say that?
Because how many, like you said, Netanyahu's been in power for in and out of power for 25 years.
Yeah.
Right? For people who don't know, Netanyahu is the Israeli equivalent of all the drama that surrounds Donald Trump. Right? He is also under corruption charges. He is also under criminal charges. He is also known as being uh, somebody who is hyper loyal to his own faction rather than to the people of Israel. There's a half of Israel doesn't want Netanyahu in power, just like half of the United States doesn't want Donald Trump to be in power.
Yeah.
Wildly controversial figure. Only somehow he has been a prime minister, moved out of the office, moved back into the office, always retains some kind of power, even when he's shrouded with criminal and corruption charges and fraudulence charges, right? Like there's all sorts of bad stuff around this guy, but he still has this power because, like you said, his cabinet, his cronies are ultra orthodox,
Yes.
ultra right, and they're the ones that are really calling the shots. The world can hate Netanyahu because he takes the bullets for everybody else that he represents. But the question is Israel becoming more democratic? Because they're calling for, just look at what happened, after Benny Gantz, who was part of the war cabinet. Benny Gantz stepped out of the war cabinet in May, I want to say it was.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And he said, if we don't have a solution to end Gaza, I will leave the war cabinet.
Yeah. Respect to him, by the way.
And then he did. He said, fuck this. You guys, you don't have a plan for Gaza. I am leaving. I won't be part of this. What did Netanyahu do next? He dissolved the rest of the war cabinet. He was like, oh, well, shit, if Benny's going to leave,
We don't need it.
we don't need it at all. I got your war cabinet of one right here. And then all these, what's that sound like, dude? That sounds a whole hell of a lot more authoritarian than it does democratic, right? So, and then Jordan is a fantastic example because Jordan, they're gangster in Jordan.
Yeah.
Like
Mukabara? Is that right?
the American military loves working with the Jordanians. The Jordanians like working with the U.S. military. They are not oil rich. They are just legit, hardworking, like industrial, entrepreneurial mindset people in the Middle East. And they're strategically relevant because they're neighbors to Israel right there in the center of the Middle East. But they're also Sunni and pro Sunni, pro Islam, pro everything else. So Israel is not the only benefit or the only benefactor that we have in the Middle East. We're on good terms with UAE, we're on good terms with Saudi, we're on good terms with Jordan. We have other allies in the region. But the reason that Israel is so valuable to the United States is because we built that country after World War II. Like their democracy is based on our democracy, based on the UK democracy. Their industrial base, their manufacturing process, their natural resources are valuable to us, whether it's the gem trade. I mean, one of the largest exporters in the world of high tech medical equipment is Israel.
Yeah.
So if you want an MRI, you're getting it out of an Israeli machine, unless you want to start getting your MRI out of a Russian or Chinese made machine.
No, fuck that.
Right? So there's all sorts of reasons why we want to maintain, not to mention the promise that we made to the Jewish people coming out of World War II that we would make sure that never happens again. Right? So there's all sorts of reasons why we need to protect the state of Israel. But that doesn't mean we need to adhere to this idea that there'll never be a two-state solution on the land where Israelis live.
So what he's failing to also realize is, I mean, first off, let me just combat, like, we use Chinese products every day. A lot of your Apple products made in China, a lot of your car parts and a lot of the clothes you wear is made in China. A lot of the medicines that you've been getting, and medical equipment is also made in China. So just to say that we need to get it from one country versus the other is crazy. We need the highest quality, and a lot of that can be made in America. So that's not even a good enough justification, um, for for supplying that. Two, you'll see in this next video that we've since 1948 we have funded them $300 billion, and that would be equivalent to today's inflation. And that's probably not including the trillions of dollars, the multiple tens of trillions of dollars that we spent on, these 7 wars that we've been in since 2001. And all of that was literally at the behoo of Bibi Netanyahu. So there's really no good enough reason to sit here and support, this country. Um, that's for one. For two, he didn't give any details. A lot of the intelligence information that we get is not even credible. Um, it actually has put us in a lot of in a lot of danger. Um, we could have developed something like Pegasus, which they developed Pegasus, which is a spying software that literally can break in to, any little bit of your electronics and, be able to watch what you're doing, saying, dang near almost predict what you're thinking, like on some Minority Report kind of stuff. Um, the we have had great relationships with Saudi Arabia, and of course, they're not a democracy; they are a monarch. But they've pretty much committed equivalent amount of crimes that Israel has. So to sit here and say that, you know, that's not a good thing, not necessarily not a good thing, but to sit here and say that this one country is better than another country when they both violate human rights and they both, hurt and kill and murder um, innocent individuals. Um, that's kind of slow. Plus, we're kind of in this position where we're tied with Saudi Arabia, and of course, you're going to say, "Well, we're the largest oil producer in the world." We could be, but we don't have enough refineries for one, and two, our oil is exported into the market, so we don't necessarily get to benefit from our own oil production. Um, a lot of what we get is from Canada and from Saudi Arabia, and you have to have an agreement between OPEC members or the OPEC cartel to be able to keep, prices down, and so it's even our support for Israel is actually, harming us with other Islamic countries that we do get along with, the United Emirates, Jordan, Turkey is not necessarily not necessarily a Arabs, but is definitely, kind of on that cusp of um, Southeastern European, Middle Eastern, um, and obviously with Saudi Arabia. So we definitely have other benefits. We definitely have people who could actually get us better information, um, that we don't necessarily have to go to war with or war for, than Israel. But I really highly recommend that you look at the John Mersheimer. He's been on a few podcasts now, and he's definitely wrote the book called The Israel Lobby, and it's actually a net negative for us to support Israel. So to kind of combat what Andrew Bustamante has said in this video, it is really a net negative to support them, and so we should be very cautious about it. But that's about it for today. No, not gonna say for today, but for at least for this video. But yeah, so y'all be good. Y'all be safe. Peace.